This video will cover the initial design and construction of the Dollar Store Dollhouse. For the design of the house, I wanted to work with foam boards that could be obtained from the dollar store. These are 30-inch by 20-inch by 1/4 inch, and they are not perfectly square and the edges are not perfectly cut. With this in mind, I could not depend on the full 30 inches of each board, so my design had to take this into account as I came up with the dimensions. Since the largest full dimension could only be 30 inches max, I worked backwards to design the panels of the house. The roof would be the longest dimension, and the house walls would be inset from a slight overhang of the roof. I browsed many images of Pennsylvania Stone Colonial homes and researched colonial home design. I came across a site discussing the perfect architectural proportions of a colonial house. This guided the design to be symmetrical. However, I was not able to use the Fibonacci ratio to produce the outcome since it would have made the house too big. I used PowerPoint to design the panels and ensure that they fit properly before cutting the actual boards. The focus of the design was the exterior, since this would be a miniature model and not an actual dollhouse. The software allowed me to fine-tune the layout and placement of the windows and doors, and I was able to render the house by placing the components together on the computer. It took some thought to keep in mind the thickness of the board and how they needed to overlap. I made a number of changes along the way, but the core construction and layout was highly aided by first designing this on the computer. This step also allowed me to estimate the number of foam boards I needed to purchase at the store. I then cut the primary walls and floor. When cutting foam core, it is best to use a sharp blade and make several light cuts at a shallow angle to the board. If you try to cut the board too aggressively, it will cause the foam to crimp and result in a jagged edge. The goal is to have a clean, crisp cut. I used a standard X-Acto knife and was able to keep the same blade throughout the entire project by sharpening the blade with a stone sharpening block. I would glide the blade along the stone at an angle for each side of the blade. For the large core panels of the house, I used a long straight edge and a right angle ruler to keep the cut straight and square. There were a few oops along the way, so I had to pick up additional foam boards as the project progressed. That is the advantage of using such a cheap building product. After laying out the location of the windows and doors on the computer, I penciled these onto the foam panels, then cut out the openings. I wanted to create the illusion of thick stone walls, so I added one additional layer around the window using 1/2 inch strips of foam board and 3 additional strips around the doors. I wanted to have a recessed entry door to also give the illusion of thick walls and create a small covered entry without an exterior overhang. I had seen these recessed doorways on many very old homes and thought this provided an understated elegance and charm to the entry. Later, the additional layers will provide support to wrap the faux stone around the edges. I decided to design an internal support, and as the construction progressed, the pieces were cut to interlock and provide support for the walls and roof. I chose not to glue the support to the structure so that I could more easily access the interior when needed. The roof support was glued to the roof, and slots allowed the roof to interlock to the internal support system. Additional videos will be discussing the assembly of the structure to show how the panels are attached to create the shell of the house. Thanks for watching.